Hello and welcome back. I am bringing to you a listener and viewer requested episode yet again. So I'm excited that we've got topics that you're really interested in hearing about. And like have always said, it's my job, it's my duty to answer those calls, answer those questions when they come up. So this one goes out to my girl, Audrey Rose. Thank you, Audrey Rose, for asking about this particular topic. We're going to be focusing today on specifically nutrition labels. And so I want to tell you before we dive right in, before we get going, where we're headed with this. So, um, first we're going to be talking about like the importance of nutrition labels, like, why do we have them, right? Secondly, we're going to be focusing on what can be gained by looking at nutrition labels. So I'm going to break down the four components of a nutrition label. The next part I'm going to focus on is going to be what we should be mindful of when we're looking at nutrition labels. And then that's actually going to take us into the top 11 ingredients that we should be really trying to avoid. And so we want to be looking for these things and be aware that they could be hiding inside our processed and packaged foods. And so looking to identify them on a nutrition label is going to be key. So let's go ahead and let's jump into it. All right. So first things first, the importance of nutrition labels. So of course, we have nutrition labels because they help us to make healthier choices, right? They allow us to see what's in foods, and they allow us to identify things potentially that we want to see in the foods that we're going to be eating, right? So, for example, we're looking for something that has a lot of fiber. We're going to pick up something that has a high fiber content in the nutrition label, right? Um, the other reason that nutrition labels are important too, there's actually several, of course, but another reason nutrition labels are important is they help us to prevent and or reduce consumer deception, because if we didn't have these nutrition labels, there would be a lot more that we didn't know was lying inside our foods or how it was, um, you know, processed and packaged, if those things were not readily available to us. So it's the government's way of being a little bit more transparent with us when these companies are creating foods and selling them in stores. However, yes, it's helping them to be more transparent, but there are still so many things that we don't know that are not on these nutrition labels. So it's just really important to take the information that you get on a nutrition label with a grain of salt. Doesn't mean that none of it's true, but it just means that you're not getting, with most nutrition labels, you're not getting the full scope or the full picture of what's really inside that food. So you just have to be very mindful of what you're consuming. And the biggest piece here is, the FDA is responsible for regulating our foods and making sure that each food that is on the shelf in our store has a nutrition label. Now, obviously, if it is a whole food, it's not going to have that. Um, but I really like this description that I found from the CDC that says the FDA is responsible for regulating our foods that are on the supermarket shelves, the grocery store shelves, right, the center aisle shelves, and the USDA is responsible for regulating the side counters, so the things like the meat counter and the deli counters, right? So it's important to know that yes, while there is regulation to an extent when we talk about the foods that are being put on our shelves, there's still, as you and I know, so many things that are hidden inside packages of food that, in other countries have been banned. So it's just really important to know what you're consuming, what you're putting into your body, because ultimately, at the end of the day, you get to decide what you do and don't consume. So just keep that in mind, regardless of what a nutrition label says. Um, you you are the one who gets to decide what is going to go in your body and what's not. So let's dive into what can be gained from looking at nutrition labels. So there's really four key parts to a nutrition label, and those four key pieces are the serving information, the calories, the nutrients, and the quick guide to the percentage of daily recommended value of nutrients. So we're going to dive into those briefly. And just again, to be mindful, we know that there should be a lot more, right? We should have a lot more knowledge and understanding around what's in our foods than the little itty bitty description of it on the back of the package. So, there is no way that we could have a full scope of what is in the foods that we're buying from the store that are in a package with just that little itty bitty label. So, the first thing, like I said, is the serving information. This is obviously going to tell you how many servings are per package, as well as the serving size for an individual serving. Now, it's really important to remember that this is not a scientific calculation. This is just merely a recommendation. So this is, when we look at it, it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. However, we know that there are many people that either eat more than that or less than that, right? So to say that this is, hardcore, we need to stick to that serving size, that can ebb and flow depending on who you are. Also, how fast your metabolism processes, right? Because the next piece is piece number two. The second component to the nutrition label is the calories, right? And again, like I said, it's based off a 2,000 calorie diet, all these recommendations on the nutrition label. Well, depending on how fast or slow, like I just mentioned, your metabolism processes food is going to depend on, how much you can consume of that food. Okay, the second part is the calories. So we just talked about the fact that, the nutrition label is based off of a 2,000 calorie diet, but not everybody eats 2,000 calories per day. Some eat more than that, some eat less than that, right? We also know that everybody's metabolism is different. Some process faster, some process slower. So it's just important to keep in mind that really at the end of the day, that calorie number that is on the nutrition label is really just telling you how many calories it's going to take to burn that energy off, right? To burn through the calories inside that food. The third piece is going to be the nutrients. So this is going to be, how much fiber, vitamins, and minerals are inside the food. There's more than just those things, but those are some of the key pieces is like the vitamins and minerals. Especially calcium we know is in there a lot, iron's in there a lot, as some of the things that we see on the nutrition label. And obviously we want to be looking for things that have higher content of fiber, higher content of vitamins and minerals, because those are things that our body needs in order to function properly and to be healthy. The fourth and final thing that we can find on the nutrition label is going to be the quick guide to the percentage of daily of DV, so the daily value of each amount of the nutrients that are inside your food that you're consuming or that you're purchasing from the store. So again, keep in mind, this is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you are someone eating more than that, then the percentage you're going to need is going to be more than what's on the label. If you are someone who's eating less than that, then you just, again, need to keep in mind that if you're not eating the serving size on the box, then you're not actually getting those values. You're getting a little bit less. So it's really important to remember those things when we're looking at that nutrition label, because for many of us, the information that is on the label is not actually reflecting what we're consuming, right? Because most of us are probably not eating a 2,000 calorie diet. Like I said, we're either eating more than that or less than that. So that's going to fluctuate in terms of how much we're getting of the nutrients inside that particular product. So now let's go ahead and dive into what we should really be mindful of. So I want to identify 4 things that I want you to be mindful of, and then we're going to go into the top 11 ingredients that we really need to um, be aware of, and then also be trying to avoid when we are consuming processed and packaged goods. So the first thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is the difference between saturated fat and unsaturated fat. So saturated fat at room temperature is going to solidify, whereas unsaturated fat is going to stay liquid at room temperature. This is really important because when we're talking about this being in your body, right? If we are consuming a lot of saturated fat, then that can build up in our arteries and cause blockages, which we know can lead to heart disease, and stroke. So it's really important to be mindful of how much saturated fat is in the packaged and processed foods that you're eating, and to really opt for things that either have a low saturated fat content, or products that have unsaturated fat versus saturated fat. The second piece is sodium. It's really important that I make sure you understand that sodium increases our blood pressure and therefore can put us at a greater risk of heart disease and stroke. So items that have a higher content of sodium are not going to be great for our bodies, especially our hearts. So making sure that you are looking at how much sodium is inside a particular product and really looking for things that are low on the sodium content, especially when you're looking at a serving size and you see the one serving size of something has, in the triple or um, quadruple digits of sodium. That's really not something that we want to be consuming on a regular basis, because that's really not doing our bodies good in the long run, like I said, when it comes to our heart health and our overall health. Now, the next one is going to be carbs. I've talked about this before, and actually in my last episode, when I focused on protein bars, different protein bars, I brought this up just briefly, but I am going to bring it up again. If you didn't know, carbs, when they are processed, when they are broken down, they break down into sugar, whereas when protein breaks down, it breaks down into amino acids. So it's really important to know that even if the sugar content is low inside the processed packaged food that you are consuming, if the carbohydrate content is really high, that's going to ultimately translate into sugar. When it processes, it's going to become sugar. So just being aware that you don't want your carbohydrate levels to be super sky high on those nutrition labels, because ultimately they're going to be processed into sugar in the long run. And we know that sugar can raise our blood pressure. It can cause a lot of unsettling in the body, including having that unstable blood sugar, which means it can mess with our mood. It also is going to make us feel more jittery. It's going to ultimately, if we have an unstable blood sugar, it's going to make us crave food more often. So we want to have a regulated blood sugar so that we are not constantly feeling like we need to stuff our face. So the last thing I want to share with you in terms of being mindful before we get into the 11 ingredients to avoid would be GMO. So if you didn't know what GMO is, or if you've heard it, but you just don't quite know what exactly is that representing for me when I look at a nutrition label. So GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. And so this means that they are genetically manipulated by machines. Okay. And these tend to be more laden with pesticides and other harmful chemicals, which means our bodies are taking in toxins that they shouldn't be. And that ultimately can cause a lot of awful things. It could wreak a lot of havoc in our bodies, could lead to potentially more oxidative stress, which then can, if not processed effectively, if not ridded of by the body through the liver processing these harmful toxins and waste, it can ultimately lead to dis-ease and disease over time. So just want you to be aware of when you see something that says non-GMO, that's really good. We can pretty much safely assume that if it doesn't say non-GMO, that it probably has some genetically modified organisms. It's a way for the the companies, the mass production of food in this country. It's a way for them to make things more efficient and faster and ultimately cheaper. So while it's helping them, with their bottom line, it's negatively hurting us as the consumer with our health taking the brunt of things. So just please keep that in mind when you are looking at products. And if you see that it says non-GMO, that's really something that you want to um, be opting for. All right, so let's get into the last thing that I want to share with you, which is the top 11 ingredients to avoid. Okay. And so the first one is going to be carrageenan. And this is an additive that is used as a stabilizer, and it's found in most processed and packaged foods. It's actually extracted from seaweed and processed with alkaline substances. But it can unfortunately cause a lot of digestive problems such as bloating, IBS, and inflammation. And currently, the FDA has approved it, but there's still a lot of debate on whether or not this is truly safe to eat. So, carrageenan is something that you're really going to want to try and avoid if at all possible. So if you see it on a nutrition label, you really want to make sure that you're not consuming uh, a product that has that in it. The next thing is artificial colors, which I'm sure you knew was coming, but we know that things like red 40, caramel color, and yellow 6, these things are really not good for our bodies. And we know that a lot of these things are in products to make them look more enticing, to flavor them, to make them taste better. But unfortunately, these things come with lots of side effects. And some of these are things like cancer. They've been linked to cancer, allergies, and even hyperactivity. So, none of these things are things that we want as consumers, and especially things we don't want our families to experience or to have to endure. So just be mindful that when you see things like red 40 caramel color and yellow 6, these are things we really want to not consume if at all humanly possible. Okay, number 3 is going to be high fructose corn syrup. So this we know is a cheaper form than the regular sugar, right? So high fructose corn syrup is cheaper, and it's actually sweeter, but it's because it's also processed. And so high fructose corn syrup has to go through the liver, right? Just like everything else, it has to go through the liver to process. But unfortunately, if you're eating a lot of other crap, then it can overload the liver. And high fructose corn syrup is often associated with individuals who end up developing fatty liver disease. Because this is something that can contribute to that overload of toxicity in the body. And when the liver can't process all the toxins and you laden it with all of this processed sugar, the liver just eventually can often give up, which is where, you don't have a well-functioning liver to process out all that garbage that it typically would process out. Now, consuming too much of high fructose corn syrup can also lead to insulin resistance, so your blood sugar being dysregulated, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. So just keep all of that in mind. And again, this is not to scare you, this is just to inform you, it was brought to my attention with this episode that we just don't know as much as we should about nutrition labels and just about nutrition in general. And so I really wanted to create this episode to shed light on the importance of understanding, what is going into our bodies and how we can take a stance to be, um, more of an advocate for our health and the future generations' health by being cognizant and aware of some of these harmful things that are in processed and packaged foods. So number 4 is going to be IMOs. So IMOs are a mixture of short chain carbohydrates that are often called high maltose. And your body actually can't fully break these down in the digestion process. So this, as you probably can guess, can lead to a lot of digestive issues, but it can also spike your blood sugar. So it's just another one of those things that you really don't want to be consuming. So if you see IMOs, that's typically labeled as isomalto oligosaccharides. If you see that on a package label, you really want to avoid that. Number 5 is sugar alcohols. Again, we touched upon this last week in last week's episode. And these are used as a way to reduce the amount of sugar in foods while still providing a sweet taste. However, because they're processed and they are synthetic, they don't process very well. They're artificial, so they don't process very well in our digestive system. And so again, this can lead to things like gas and bloating and stomach pain, and even high blood sugar. So if you're going to have sugar, try, if at all possible, to keep it the natural organic sugar, instead of the sugar alcohols. I do want to mention a couple different sugar alcohols that we really want to be avoiding. There's 7 really common sugar alcohols. So I'm not going to go into what each of them are, but I'm just going to list them off so that if you do want to go back and look them up, you can. And I'll list them in the show notes. That way, if you don't know how to spell them, you can just copy and paste them from the show notes. But the first one would be erythritol. So that's number 1. That's very popular. The next one would be HSH. Third one is isomalt. And then we have lactitol, maltitol, mannitol, and sorbitol. Again, these are all sugar alcohols. They're very common in our processed and packaged foods, and they really need to be avoided if at all possible. They just don't sit well with the body and with our digestive system, to be specific. All right, number 6 is going to be, let me just make sure. Yeah, number 6 is going to be whey protein. If you are someone who is sensitive to dairy or you have a dairy allergy, you probably already know that you should be avoiding whey because whey is actually partially created or made with dairy. It's derived from dairy and has lactose in it. So it is processed and often does have some unsafe toxins. And because whey protein is often in protein powders, we don't have regulation with protein powders. They're not FDA regulated. So a lot of toxic crap can find its way into protein powders, which is one of those things where it's like, you don't know that unless you listen to something like this, right? So if you have a dairy allergy or you're dairy sensitive, you definitely want to make sure that you're staying away from whey protein. But also, if you're not, just keep in mind that a lot of whey protein has a lot of processed additives in it, including harmful toxins. And then number 7, the last one is going to be oils. So many oils in the products that we get from the grocery store or the supermarket have high counts of inflammatory oils. And they are processed oils. So it's really important that we are cognizant and aware of that because these Oils also then have a lot of saturated fat in them. So if at all possible, it's really uh, highly um, important, and it's to your best interest to really be looking for products that have higher quality oils like olive oil or extra virgin olive oil or avocado oil. Um, Coconut oil is kind of on the fence because it does have some saturated fat content, and it does solidify at room temperature. So it can clog the arteries, like I mentioned earlier, a lot more easily. But I would say olive oil and um, avocado oil are going to be your best friends when it comes to looking for oils on packages, because those are going to be anti-inflammatory and they're going to have saturated fats in them, and they're going to be a lot better for the body. So the heavily processed and inflammatory oils that you really want to make sure that you're staying away from would be these top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, I was just making sure that I have all of them listed here. So canola oil, um, corn oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, and palm oil. These are going to be the ones that you want to make sure that you are um, eating sparingly, or buying packaged processed foods that have it in there very sparingly. Like, don't buy those things very often, or not at all if you can make that happen. Because again, to my point, they do the body no good. They can make us head on to the fast track of heart disease and artery clogging a lot faster, and they're very inflammatory, which just means you're going to have a lot more puffiness and inflammation, which is not good, and really hits hard on the immune system, which is inside our digestive tract. So not only are you making it harder for your immune system to work, but it's also not doing any justice and not doing any favors to your digestive tract either. All right, number 8 is going to be natural flavors. So these are used again, like many other things, to enhance the flavor of the foods that we purchase. And these flavors often are addicting. That is, part of the reason that they put these natural flavors in there, is to make you come back for more. But you might be wondering, well, why then are they called natural flavors if they're really not necessarily natural? Well, they are derived from a natural source, either a plant or an animal, but then they're also mixed with many different ingredients, including oftentimes chemicals and solvents. Um, and brands aren't required to put what's in the natural flavor on their nutrition labels. So it's just best for us to avoid them, because again, we are just left to speculate what could be inside those natural flavors that we don't know, because um they're not on the nutrition label. Number 9 is going to be inulin. So inulin is a type of prebiotic extracted from chicory root, and it's to help boost the fiber content in products. But if you consume too much inulin, it can actually do the reverse of promoting a healthy digestion, and can actually lead to gas, and bloating and discomfort. So some people don't do very well with inulin. Some people don't have that much sensitivity or an issue to it, but um, there's a lot more people that are sensitive to inulin than they are to other types of fiber. So it's really important to know that if you've ever eaten something with inulin in there, and you've had some sort of a reaction, maybe like gas or bloating, it's probably because you're sensitive to that. And so it's really important for you to find um, an alternative dietary fiber that you can consume that will not wreak havoc on your digestion like inulin often does for many people. Um, all right, number 10 is Gour gum. And Gour gum is a long chain carbohydrate. It's commonly found in ice creams, sauces, and soups. And it binds or thickens foods. And some studies have also shown that it can help you to feel more full. therefore eating less. So, while that does seem like a plus, right? There have also been studies that have shared some adverse effects that it can have on your body too. So things like causing more swelling and blockage of your esophagus, so not being able to breathe as well. Um, and to prevent this, kind of back and forth of there's some good things, there's some not so great things. The FDA has placed strict guidelines on how much of this ingredient can be added to foods to reduce the risk of these harmful side effects. So, with the fact that the FDA is already on top of it, so to speak, it just reminds us that probably we shouldn't be consuming that if the FDA is already saying, hey, we should only have, this much in our products. It probably just means we should not be consuming it to begin with. All right, and then number 11, last but definitely not least, is xanthan gum. And that is a very popular additive that acts as a stabilizer and a thickener. But it's not only found in food. You can also find it in insecticides, in toilet bowl cleaners, and in adhesives in wallpaper, which that's just gross, right? Where this stuff that's in other products that we can't eat is also in food and we're eating it, right? It's made from fermented sugar that creates a glue-like substance that's dried and turned into powder. It is lab made, and your body can't break it down because of that. And so it causes digestive issues. And, the more we eat it, it alters our gut bacteria and our gut microbiome. So it's just not something that we want to be consuming at all. So, like I have always said in every episode that I share with you, I hope this really opens your eyes. I hope this is not something where you're like, oh my God, now I shouldn't eat anything, right? That's not where I'm going with this. As always, my job is to bring you the knowledge and to let you do with it what you may, right? Like what you feel is best. It's inevitable that some of these things are going to find their way into our bodies, whether it's through inhalation or through consumption of food. But if we can be more mindful, if we can be more nutrition literate on, what is in our food and things we should be avoiding and taking just baby steps to incrementally, move the needle towards more healthier foods, more healthier ways of living. That's all I could ask, right? That's the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this is that it's not, let's throw everything out of the cabinets or the pantry overnight and start anew, start fresh. No, it's let's be nutritionally literate and let's start, figuring out what is it that is not feeling good in our bodies and what are some things we can replace these foods with that are going to be more nutritionally sound and that are going to support us more holistically in not only our physical wellness but our mental and emotional wellness too, because we know as humans that food does have a holistic impact on how we not only on how we look but how we feel and how we be. So, as always, I hope that this episode brought you some clarity, brought you some new information, and can help you to continue to strive to make even better choices for your health and well-being and for the health and well-being of your loved ones. So, without further ado, I'm going to wrap things up, but I hope you have a wonderful week and I will chat with you again next week. Take care.